that knot of anxiety you feel when you even think about your private details, your Aadhaar, your PAN, your phone number, bank accounts potentially floating around in some shadowy corner of the internet. It's not a far-fetched worry. It's a reality that's hit close to home in Tamil Nadu, not just once, but actually twice in 2024.
Exactly. And today we're going to, pull back the curtain on a pretty significant failure in digital security. 2 confirmed data breaches aimed at the Tamil Nadu Labour Department systems.
These are the very systems supposed to be safeguarding a huge amount of sensitive info.
Absolutely. And this isn't just some minor technical hiccup we're talking about. It's a serious potential exposure of very personal data.
Right, these Labour Department portals, they were meant to be like secure digital vaults for employer and worker information.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they turned out to have some, well, pretty significant vulnerabilities. What's really unsettling, I think, is the apparent disconnect between how serious these breaches were happening in May and then again in November last year and the initial reaction from the officials.
Yeah, it felt a bit like hoping no one would notice the elephant in the digital room, that kind of thing.
Exactly. That quiet response really makes you question, well, how much priority is actually given to protecting this kind of data?
It does. So our goal today is to really dig into this digital debacle. We want to understand what went wrong, how it happened, and crucially, what it all means for you listening and, for the broader issue of trust in our digital systems.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty, this great data heist. We know there were 2 separate intrusions. Tamil Nadu Labour Department 2024, first in May.
And then, worryingly, a repeat in November.
Right. And that second breach, the one around November 11th, that prompted a pretty big step, didn't it?
It did. The filing of a first information report, an FIR, that's the initial police complaint that starts an investigation on November 14th, 2024.
So that formal action, that really shows they eventually acknowledged how serious it was.
Definitely. And this FIR, it indicated that the hacker groups were claiming they'd extracted the complete databases from both the main Labor Department portal.
And also the Inter-State Migrant Workers Management Information System, the MIS portal.
That's the one, yes.
Okay, so what kind of information are we talking about here? What was potentially exposed?
Well, we're talking about the kind of data that, frankly, cyber criminals dream of getting their hands on.
Right.
For employers, this reportedly included their Aadhaar numbers that unique ID their PAN cards, which are crucial for financial stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. Plus phone numbers, addresses, and beyond just the employer's details, a whole range of documents related to their employees were also potentially accessed.
So this wasn't just a list of names then. It could affect a really wide range of people registered under different labor laws.
Precisely. The individuals affected were registered under things like the Tamil Nadu Shops and Establishments Act, which covers a huge number of businesses, small shops, bigger firms,
Oh, yeah?
the Motor Transport Workers Act, and, importantly, given the MIS portal, the Inter-State Migrant Workers Act, even the Beedi and Cigar Workers Act.
Wow. So that really highlights the potential impact. Shops, industries, private firms all over the state.
It could have affected almost anyone registered through those portals.
And you mentioned that Interstate Migrant Workers MIS portal. That was launched pretty recently, right? 2023.
Yeah, relatively new. Its main purpose was to create a central system to register and manage migrant workers in Tamil Nadu. For efficiency, worker welfare, that kind of thing.
Okay, makes sense. But what data did it hold? Anything particularly sensitive?
That's the crucial part. Because of its purpose, it held extremely sensitive information, including Aadhaar numbers and, critically, the bank account details of these workers.
Oof. That detail about the bank accounts is especially worrying.
It really is. These are often people in, let's face it, vulnerable economic situations.
Yeah.
The thought of their financial information being compromised, it's deeply concerning.
Absolutely. I mean, if those bank details ended up in the wrong hands.
The potential for financial exploitation is huge. It could be devastating for them, for their families, wiping out savings, stopping them sending money home. Just awful.
So how did these digital break-ins actually happen? Do we know what tools the hackers were using to get past the security?
Well, the FIR filed after that November breach gave us some clues. It confirmed they used a tool known as GSocket.
GSocket. Doesn't sound familiar.
No, it's not your everyday software. It's a peer-to-peer connection tool, quite advanced, actually. It's specifically designed to bypass typical network security, things like NAT.
Network address translation. That lets multiple devices share one connection.
Right. And firewalls, the usual network security guards. GSocket is built to get around those.
So if normal security is like locked doors and cameras, GSocket is like a secret tunnel, straight into the system undetected.
That's a really good way to put it. A kind of digital skeleton key, maybe? It suggests the attackers weren't just, casual hackers. This points to a more skilled, possibly organized group.
Okay, that's concerning. And where does this stolen data usually end up? We hear about the dark web all the time. What is that, really, and why is it relevant here?
The dark web is essentially a hidden part of the internet. Regular search engines like Google don't index it. You need special software or configurations to even access it.
And it's used for?
Unfortunately, it's become a marketplace for all sorts of illegal activities, and buying and selling stolen data is a huge part of that underground economy.
Like an untraceable online black market.
Pretty much, and this stolen information is valuable. Rajaram Venkatarman, someone who knows cybersecurity well, mentioned that even single bits of info, like credit card details, can sell for, say, 300 to 500 rupees on the dark web.
Okay, so not a fortune for one,
But now imagine the hackers claiming they got entire databases, potentially millions of records. You start to see the sheer scale of the potential jackpot they were after.
Yeah, that really paints a disturbing picture.
Right.
Okay, so with this massive potential leak of really sensitive data, how did the government, specifically the Labor Department, react publicly?
Well, this is where it gets quite concerning. Initially, the Labor Department's reaction seems to have been to downplay it. There were reports, from employers calling about systems being down.
And they were told.
They were told it was just a temporary data loss.
Temporary data loss. That feels like a massive understatement, given what we now know. It's like calling a tsunami a bit of a splash.
Exactly. And the fact that there wasn't apparently any proactive effort to tell the affected employers and workers is a huge issue.
Because without knowing, their data might be compromised.
They're completely in the dark, unaware of the increased risk of identity theft, financial scams, all sorts of nasty stuff.
Right. Now, we did hear the Tamil Nadu State Data Center got involved. What did they do?
Thankfully, yes. The State Data Center hosts the Labor Department systems, and they were able to recover a significant portion of the affected data.
Okay, so that's good. It limited some of the damage.
Definitely helped limit some potential fallout. But the Labor Department, sticking to this data loss description rather than calling it a full-blown breach, it just feels inadequate, like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Yeah, it reminds me of that reported comment from a senior official. When asked why they hadn't announced a breach, they apparently said they could only confirm the website was down, but couldn't verify the hackers' claims of theft yet.
Yes, the analogy used was quite something like saying someone might have broken into your house, but you won't confirm anything was stolen until you've checked every single item.
Which sounds cautious, maybe, but not helpful to the potential victims.
Exactly. While caution is understandable, the lack of a clear warning to people whose data might be out there seems like a pretty significant lapse in responsibility.
Okay, but on the positive side, an FIR was eventually filed with the Cybercrime police after that second breach in November.
That's true. Lodging that formal complaint does signal they recognized a criminal act had occurred. But someone like S. Cannon from CITU, the trade union, raised some important points. He noted there had been suspicions about security before, especially with the migrant workers portal, and the department had apparently explained previous issues as just a corrupt database.
A corrupt database? That sounds convenient. Like blaming bad curry for a kitchen fire. Doesn't quite fit the scale, does it?
It certainly raises questions about the underlying security practices and maybe the openness in communicating these problems.
And wasn't there something else missing? Basic website stuff.
Yes. Adding to this is the apparent lack of some basic website management protocols. The official guidelines for Indian government websites, version 3.0, they clearly state that government sites need to display contact details for a Web Information Manager, a WIM.
To ensure accountability. A point of contact.
Exactly. Someone responsible, someone people can contact. But neither the main Labor Department portal nor the migrant workers' MIS portal seem to have this clearly listed, or even an easy-to-find Contact Us link on their main pages.
It's like a shop with no manager on duty and no customer service desk.
Pretty much. Especially for systems handling such sensitive personal data, it feels like a fundamental oversight.
So why is this lack of transparency such a big deal? Beyond just not following the rules.
It's not just procedural. It directly violates guidelines, yes, but more importantly, it seriously erodes public trust. And crucially, it stops people whose data might be compromised from taking steps to protect themselves.
Right. If your Aadhaar or bank details might be out there, you need to know.
You absolutely need to know. So you can monitor your accounts, watch out for phishing scams, be extra vigilant. Without that information being shared, people are left completely vulnerable.
Okay, so let's broaden this out. Why should this whole situation in Tamil Nadu matter to our listeners, even if they don't live there or aren't directly involved with these specific laws?
Because this isn't just a local issue. It's a really stark wake-up call for all of us about the risks of storing huge amounts of personal data digitally, especially when it's held by government bodies.
If it can happen to a state labor department,
It makes you ask, what's stopping attackers from targeting other systems? Systems holding potentially even more sensitive data. Think voter IDs, ration card details, maybe even our medical records.
that's a really chilling thought. The potential for identity theft, financial damage, it becomes very real.
Exactly. Identity theft can wreck people's finances. Drained accounts, fraudulent loans. It's a nightmare to fix. And for those small business owners and workers in Tamil Nadu, there's the added risk of targeted scams using their stolen info.
And again, circling back to the migrant workers.
Yes, we can't forget them. As we said, often in precarious situations, having their bank details compromised could be utterly catastrophic, wiping out everything they've worked for.
It really throws a spotlight on a bigger issue, doesn't it? This trend of collecting massive amounts of personal data.
Sometimes without a really clear framework or a public explanation of why it's being collected and, importantly, how it's going to be protected.
It feels a bit like being asked to just hand over your diary to someone without knowing why or if they'll keep it safe.
That's a good analogy. And without those clear guidelines, that transparency, there's just no real accountability when things go wrong, as they clearly did here.
Which brings us back to what experts like Rajaram Venkataraman were saying about security.
Absolutely. His emphasis on needing a multi-layered approach is key. You need strict limits on who can even access the data. And crucially, you need strong encryption.
Encryption being the process of scrambling the data, making it unreadable without a key.
Exactly, like locking your valuables in a really strong safe. Without that, especially without top-notch encryption, it's basically leaving the door unlocked in a dodgy neighborhood. It's an open invitation.
It is almost darkly humorous looking back.
Yeah.
The Labor Department's under maintenance sign after a potential massive breach.
Yeah, like saying, oh, just routine plumbing when the bank vault's been emptied.
Right. And calling it data loss, like saying your house is just temporarily uninhabitable after it burned down.
The analogies definitely highlight the gap between the official spin and the potential reality. And GSocket, the tool they used. It sounds like something from a hardware store, not a sophisticated hacking tool.
You can almost picture the hackers. Yeah, use this GSocket thing, fix the sync, and grab the database while we were there.
A slightly absurd image for a very serious situation.
So where do things stand now? We know most of the data was recovered, which is definitely good news.
Yes, the state data center recovering the bulk of the data is significant, a welcome development. The Labor Department also says their portals are back online, fully functional.
And they're planning security upgrades.
They've announced plans for security revamps, yes. But, given the two breaches, the initial lack of transparency, a degree of caution, maybe even skepticism, is probably warranted.
And the cybercrime police are investigating, thanks to that November FIR. Any idea what the chances are of catching the culprits?
Unfortunately, tracing cyber attacks and catching the criminals, especially those using the dark web, is notoriously difficult. They often operate across borders, hide their tracks very well.
Which really underlines the need for prevention, right?
Yeah.
Building that digital fortress before the attack.
Exactly. That layered security approach, Rajaram Venkataraman talked about strong encryption, good firewalls acting like digital barriers, regular security checks for vulnerabilities. That's essential compared to that ideal fortress.
The Labor Department setup sounds more like a flimsy tent with a polite keep out sign.
Something like that, unfortunately.
Okay, so given these risks aren't going away, what practical steps can our listeners take right now to better protect themselves in this digital world?
There are several really important things you can do. First, keep a close eye on your financial accounts, your credit reports. Look for any unusual activity.
And report it immediately if you see something.
Absolutely. Second, use strong, unique passwords for everything. I know it's a pain, but it's crucial. Consider a password manager to help keep them secure and unique.
Good idea. What else?
Enable two-factor authentication, or 2FA, wherever it's offered. That adds a vital extra layer of security. Be super wary of phishing attempts, those dodgy emails, texts, calls, trying to trick you into giving away info. If it feels off, it probably is.
Trust your gut.
Definitely. And finally, if you do suspect your data has been compromised, report it quickly. Use the National Cybercrime Helpline, that's 1930, or their website, www.cybercrime.gov.in.
And for people in Tamil Nadu, especially employers, workers who might have been directly affected by these specific breaches.
It's really important for them to demand more transparency and accountability from the Labor Department. Ask questions. Seek clear answers. Push for real assurances about future data security. That's crucial for holding authorities responsible.
So bringing it all together, this deep dive into the Tamil Nadu Labour Department breaches, it really hammers home the vulnerabilities in our digital systems.
It does, and the absolute need for both strong security and honest communication from government bodies.
The sheer number of people potentially affected, business owners, vulnerable workers, it highlights the very real human cost when these systems fail.
Absolutely. And while data recovery is positive, those questions about accountability, about preventing repeats, they still linger.
Ultimately, this whole situation is a powerful reminder for all of us, isn't it? We need to be proactive about protecting our own digital lives.
Definitely. It makes you really think about just how much data is collected about us and maybe question how secure it truly is.
Maybe the digital world feels a bit shadowy sometimes, but by staying informed, by taking these protective steps,
We can all become a bit smarter, a bit more resilient in defending our digital selves.
it might be a good time for everyone listening to consider, what more can you do to strengthen your own digital defenses in this constantly changing landscape? Let's keep that thought, stay alert.
And maybe, just maybe, allow ourselves a wry smile at the absurdity of some of it. Because sometimes a bit of dark humor helps us face these serious challenges.